Yeah, I think that one big thing that would help is if the U.S. women's national team loses its dominance um, in soccer, in world soccer, because like women's soccer fans in the U.S. are so like transfixed with the U.S. women's national team that sometimes they don't have enough room for their local clubs. And I think that if we want to like grow and maybe even like match not only like the fervor of like other places in the world, how in love with soccer they are, but also like help develop our own players to be competitive. We need to stop treating the U.S. Women's national team as a club.
All right, and we are back again, episode 40, episode 40 of the Box to Box podcast. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jose Tejas. I am the primary host of this show, and joined by one of my primary co-hosts of the show, the amazing, sometimes delusional Andre Gutierrez, aka Coach Dre. And with us, as usual, we have a very special guest. I'll tee her up with a great intro here in just 1 second. But before I do, as I always say, guys, please, if you haven't done so already, like the video, subscribe to the channel. The support goes a long way, much longer than you know. And it's a free way to support. Why not? Now, as always, Box to Box is presented by GOLZtv. GOLZtv, where you can find your free, unlimited, fan-made footy content today. Head to GOLZtv to find all of that good stuff now. All right. Intro out of the way. Let's tee up our special guest. She is a game day editor for NWSL, first season into that role. Creates a lot of content that props up the beautiful game in the States in ways that she only knows how. I'm super excited that she's here. We have Lis Schendel on the show today. Liz, how are you? We're recording on a Tuesday. How are things?
Pretty good, no complaints. We just, you said I'm an editor. I'm a Gameday Social Editor for the league. So we wrapped up a really huge weekend. Now we're going into an international break, so I get to like do fun things and not that, working is bad, but I get to do sometimes some non-soccer things.
Nice.
And yeah, no complaints.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. And breaks are good. Breaks are good. Take more of those. Now, as most of our guests in our audience typically know, we always start the show off with a question that some tend to find a little bit philosophical. I think it's a great question to kind of get the ball rolling with the show. So with that said, Liz, who are you today?
It's so philosophical. I think that in the most like unliteral sense, I'm a student. I'm not taking any classes. I just mean that I'm learning so much from whether it's, my boss at the NWSL or my fellow content creators and fellow fans, from the players themselves teaching me about how to be, a good human being, literally everything. I think in general, the way I define myself is a student and I'm learning.
I love that. No, that honestly, that is, we said philosophical question in a very positive way, very philosophical response. I love that. We're all students of the game, students of life in our own way. And I know even with this show, Andre and I are learning every day, every episode, every guest has something to teach us. That's why we love doing it. So I'm glad that you're here. Now, how we typically structure this show is, again, we're going to go through your entire journey, not just, your career and your job and what you're doing for the league today, but starting at the very beginning. I love telling stories about, being able to help tell stories about your path and your journey as a soccer fan. The game itself, still very young in this country. We're trying to obviously grow it and hype it up in ways that only creative content can really do. So let's start at the very beginning here, okay? So let's learn a little bit more about the early days of Liz being a fan. So let me just kind of ask this general broad question. You take it in a direction that you see fit, but the earliest memories of soccer, right, from your perspective, what were those like? Did you come into this game at a later stage, or were you kind of an adamant fan from day one?
I guess I started playing, and that's where my first introduction was. My family we were big baseball, like American football fans. So we didn't really do too much with soccer until I started playing. And I played rec league and we were like pretty good. We got all the way to like the championship and I was maybe 7 or 8 and we lost that game, but it was a lot of fun. I remember getting my face shoved into the ground and getting like a fat black eye, and I'm like 7 or 8. And I was like instantly like, this is the best game ever. Like, you get
Whereas
to,
most kids that age would be like, never again. You're like, I want more.
Yeah. My mom still talks about that because she was like offended for me, but I was like, that was so fun. Like I dropped doing softball, swimming. I didn't care about anything else. This was a sport for me. And actually many years later, that girl who shoved my face into the ground became one of my best friends.
There you go.
This was
Full circle.
full circle. This was about maybe 10 years later, because I started playing competitive and like club and travel, and she was my best friend on the team, and her father was our coach, and she made the game a little bit more like advanced for me, basically, because we would just hang out and play all the time, and et cetera, et cetera. I kept playing, and then I think I stopped playing in college and needed just a really long break. And then I guess I'm here today because I stayed a fan. I of course watched the Uswnt national team, watched like at the time FC Gold Pride or like San Jose Cyber Raids were the professional teams in the Bay Area that were closest to me. They're now gone. But recently the NWSL announced that they will be expanding to the Bay Area. So
yeah, that's sweet.
Life
that's huge.
Finds a way. Yeah. So
yeah, that's awesome. Are you so you grew up in the Bay Area, like Sacramento area?
I grew up in Turlock, which is about an hour and a half. Kind of like an hour and a half without like traffic.
Yeah.
But we drove all the time to like Niners and Giants games, and in the Central Valley of California, if you're a big sports fan, that's where all your teams are.
Yeah.
So we were so used to doing that drive. But after like practice, my friends and we would drive over to like Giants games with our families, and anyway. But yeah, and we made those drives too. And that's where I saw like players like Brandy Chastain, Abby Wambach, play some of their first games.
Yep.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And I want to go back to something you mentioned there on kind of the early days of, and your memories of this game. Obviously the black eye, pivotal moment. But on top of that, right, you mentioned transitioning from rec league at some point to being a little more competitive with how you played. I always get really curious for when kids and when players enter that competitive system, when they decide, okay, rec league has kind of filled the need for now. I'm a little more competitive. I want to play against better competition. At what age did you make that transition, and why? Was it just to play against better competition, or was it deeper than that for you?
So I guess I didn't really have like a very ambitious, I didn't really consider soccer being something that I could do outside of rec, because, my family, that wasn't something that they were fully aware of. And at the time there was like really, Brandy Chastain in 1999 and like, the U.S. Women's national team. But other than that, soccer wasn't something you do like for women outside of, fun rec league. But so basically my friend who gave me that black eye when I was little, her parents and they were starting a competitive, or like her dad took on as coach for a team, and they were like, hey, get Liz in, like she's really good, and like her rec coach is like quitting. So anyway, she had just transferred to my school, and that's kind of how we connected again. And anyway, long story short, they were like, you're good, you want to do this more, you guys just want to hang out as friends. And then so that's pretty much it. I joined competitive to hang out with friends. That's and awesome. We enjoyed it. There was a lot of travel. It was expensive. But my mom, who was like a single mom, like made it all work, never missed a game, always took me to the games and stuff like that. Sometimes she'd take friends. There was some overnight travel, and she was there for all of it.
That's awesome. If you don't mind me asking, how I like to paint the picture of the obstacles to entry that exist on this side of the world. How, if you had to put a rough number on a ballpark number on it, how expensive are we talking on a yearly basis?
Yeah, nowadays, back then my mom shielded me away from like costs, so I don't fully understand how much it was. But like nowadays, like I work, locally, with a lot of like youth clubs. It depends on how serious it is, but it could be like 15,000 to like 25,000 a year sometimes. I don't know if that's like, maybe maybe that's off, but I'm pretty sure like what with like your club fees, academy fees, all your gear, and a lot of these kids nowadays are like they're working with very professional trainers outside of that. And then sometimes they're taking like, not like supplements, like pre-workout or something like that, but like they're getting them on like the honey stinger, sort of like nutritional things.
The regiment, right?
A regiment. Yeah, exactly. With like full on diet. None of that stuff where I'd like eat like, Burger King on the way to practice. Like,
didn't we all? Yeah, travel and all that other stuff. I mean, Andre, you know, I mean, better than most people, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's been a barrier for so many people, and it's interesting to hear perspectives all across the country. Like, because you think, in certain areas of the country, depending on the layout or the weather, right? Like thinking of California, such a large state. Like, I know it's broken up into NorCal and SoCal even, like, the academies are so spread apart. But when you think of like, I grew up in Chicago, and Illinois is so centralized. Even then, it was still super expensive. Like, even if you were just traveling between, Iowa, Indiana, St. Louis, and Chicago, it doesn't sound like it's a large area, but it's just, it's complicated. And so a lot of talent, misses out. And especially, at least back then when I played, women's soccer was obviously, pretty prominent in terms of, the national team and, the NWSL, things like that. But from a youth standpoint, it felt like a lot of that money was going towards the, the boys academies or the MLS academies or things like that, where like, female players that were really talented were missing out on those things. So it's just always interesting to hear perspectives, especially on this side of the world, for sure.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So, I mean, that's why I asked the question, right? Just to better understand what everybody's experience was like.
Yeah.
I've heard numbers in between as low as 5K and as high as, 35 to 40K. It just like, it could be a private school tuition. It just really depends on how in depth you really want to be with it, and how much travel you're going to be doing, how many tournaments you're going to attend. If you're older, how many showcases or college ID camps you're going to go to. That the holistic cost for pay to play on this side of the world is actually insane. But I don't want this, this interview to be all doom and gloom. I think that at the end of the day, we've scaled up soccer in a really great way. And something else that you mentioned during that kind of your early days of soccer was the '99 World Cup, right? And watching the U.S. women's national team. That was my earliest memory of women's soccer. You mentioned before that, you just didn't really hear a lot about. There was no like women's club soccer. There was no like leagues that were happening kind of week in and week out, or matches that you could go regularly play. That's why when you see like the Brandy Chastains of the world, the Mia Hamms, they all have so many caps, so many international caps, because that's all they really played consistently was they represented their national team. But I remember that '99 World Cup being the first tournament I ever personally saw. How much of that tournament do you remember?
The '99, man. I probably just the final. I don't remember really anything prior, but the final, like everyone was watching it. And I had a lot of friends that went down to it because it was, in SoCal. So a lot of people like went as a caravan. I don't think we were like interested enough to like attempt that. But I just remember the game. I remember being at my grandma's house and it was like daytime, and I think I watched it by myself. But I just remember that and just kind of like wanting the U.S. to win. I remember Brandy taking her like whipping her shirt off, and I really was just like, this is so fun. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and then the thing is, like, a lot of these players were, Brandy was playing at Santa Clara. So she was like local. A lot of them were just like, you could go out and see them on the street, basically.
Yeah.
They didn't have that huge star power before. And not for many years after did they get star power, like not them in particular, or well, they did, but like women's soccer players in general.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartely with that. I think it took a long time to scale up to a point where, you had to deal with, I guess the annoyances of being an athlete or a superstar or whatever it may be, where, you're constantly kind of noticed or berated in public. But at the end of the day, right, women's game has scaled to a point where it is now. So after that '99 tournament, I don't know, did you find yourself getting a little more curious about, I remember when I would watch, like my first World Cup I ever watched was one that I remember I saw 98. They're just matches. I was so young. I was like 7 years old. There are matches within that men's World Cup tournament that kind of are fuzzy for me. But the '02 World Cup, I remember vividly. So I don't know. I remember walking away from that tournament as a viewer and a fan thinking, man, I want to do that someday. International soccer is like the pinnacle of my youth playing days. This is all going to scale to that one day. I don't know. I guess my question's twofold. One, did that serve as like inspiration for you? Were there, I don't know, figures on the team, whether it be Brandy or anybody else that you kind of leaned on for inspiration? And then two, did you ever think WOSO or women's soccer was going to get to where it is today?
Yeah. So I thought that they were really cool, and it was really cool seeing them play like in front of so many players or in front of so many fans. But I wasn't inspired by it. I guess I actually was inspired by one of my like classmates, Danya Oliveira, who played for like the Portuguese like youth team. She was Portuguese. And her dad, I think, played for Portugal. I don't remember, or maybe I remember that weirdly, but she was so good at soccer. We would play during recess, and she was like smoking the boys. And she would go to like Mia Hamm camps and stuff like that. And I was just like, wow, you're so good. Like, go for it, girl. But yeah, I mean, they didn't inspire me to like fulfill or like find a pursuit in soccer or of any sort. I loved that for them. I was so happy for them, but it didn't resonate with me personally at that time. But I never imagined women's soccer would be where it's at today. I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe I wasn't at an age where I was enough to be that reflective. You know, at the time, you're so young. You're just so kind of just like into yourself and like your friends and like riding your bike, you know, and
just in the moment. Yeah.
In the moment. Exactly. I wasn't considering like gender empowerment or like, you know, women becoming like the next Messi or something like that. Yeah. In terms of like global superpower. But I don't know. It took me many, many years. Maybe I want to say like 2015, maybe, many years later.
So yeah. Go ahead, Andrew. Go ahead. You're good.
No, the other thing that I was going to say is, you know, it sounds like for you, your influence or your motivation was more something that you could relate to, right? Seeing somebody that you're like, I can put myself in her shoes, or I know her personally and she can tell me her story, as opposed to seeing it on a magazine or on a TV ad. And I think, you know, that's the beauty of like our generation, right? Like, I feel like a lot of folks now, when they look back at like, you know, growing up and, you know, whether it was, you know, late 90s to even the late 2000s, just like how different it was. Like, you were really in the moment. There was no social media, right? There were no Instagram profiles or no Facebook profiles. It was literally just like you and your community. And that's kind of what drove you forward. And it's just interesting to see your career now, right? Like working and doing like Gameday Social for a massive league, like how interesting that would be for somebody like you, right? So I just wanted to like touch on that, like how, if you reflect back on your time as a player growing up and then now looking back at it, like, do you think that there's, you know, some sort of like, whether it's validation to Jose's point or just kind of, you know, a really cool platform that's developed, you know, for professional athletes? Like, how do you feel proud of what you guys are doing in terms of, you know, promoting the game for NWSL?
I mean, so I think you had said something about like looking back and being reflective, and just kind of maybe using that as a lens for what I do today. I guess like, man, I don't understand. Can you repeat that question one more time? Sorry.
No, you're good. I didn't want to put you on the spot. No, I just meant like, you know, a lot of times people pursue their career based on like, I'm really passionate about this one thing. You know, like for me, for example, I'm a coach now, but that's because I've loved the game ever since I was young, right? So for me, the transition was more like, okay, you grew up and you were more, you know, motivated by your own community and your own like little group, right? Like you said, like your friends and just like what you saw at a personal level. What's it like now, like having this massive lens of looking at this, you know, obviously the major professional league in the US, where you can talk to these players and, you know, all these superstars, to use a word, right? Like they have social media profiles and brand deals and things like that. Like that has to be so different than what you grew up with. What does it feel like to work in that environment? Is it something that you enjoy? Is it something that was like very different than what you expected? Just curious about your experience.
Yeah. I mean, I never really expected for myself to get into working in soccer. I never envisioned it being a career path. I think I will say I am so grateful for soccer in general, just for what it taught me when I was little. Because I was, only child and really great at just entertaining myself. And when I did hang out with friends, that was awesome. But it really helped me come out of my shell as well. It taught me confidence in myself. And I stopped hiding behind my mom basically when we go to practice. I would run out on the field. The more in depth into soccer I got, and it really just made me I don't know, love being active and love myself and care about the people around me and whatnot. But I mean, and I just never envisioned it to be a career that you could do. But the last 10, 15 years, I've just separately outside of soccer developed skills because of my own personality traits. I like to be creative. I like to just kind of have fun and be playful. And you can kind of see that if you follow me on Twitter. You see I make the dumbest memes.
They're good. They're funny. They're good. They're good.
That Barbie one is hilarious. I'm not gonna
lie. I'll just make just random memes and stuff like that, and that's my skills, being creative, being funny, not taking myself too seriously. Moreover, just creating content that makes other people happy and want to be more involved in the community because they find happiness in it. And that's awesome. That's what I give back to soccer, I guess. And I know that women's soccer has been so much for me, and I want it to be so much for other people, no matter who they are, what they look like, or how they identify. And I just wanted to create this really awesome, inclusive, supportive, fun, energetic community. And that I never thought would be a community, because 20 years ago I'm just playing soccer, and just waiting for halftime so we could have Capri Sun. But and then now it's I'm
that was all of us. That was all of us.
Yeah, for sure.
The Capri Sun,
orange
slices, the whole nine. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think a lot of Americans resonate with that, right? How many of us played soccer growing up because frankly it was the less dangerous sport, or the most, for whatever reason, right? Maybe more accessible depending on your community, whatever it may be. But that was, I think a lot of us, I don't think many of us pictured on this side of the world that we could build careers around the game that we love. I think especially as a player, even on the men's side, I don't think it has to be women specific. On the men's side, especially in the States, and Andre had a little bit slightly different because he kind of had this pro run for a second. But I think at the end of the day, if you're not already on that path to pro, you grew up, in the late 90s, early 2000s, 2010s, you just didn't really see how this was going to pan out for you. You kind of just, maybe you had to start developing a skill set outside of that just in case as a plan B, which I heard you mention, right? Some of these skills that directly apply to the career you have today. I'm really curious, and I'm sure that others that might be listening are also curious. I still see people on random either job sites or boards, maybe on LinkedIn or the MLS page, whatever it may be, asking for ways to break into the league or asking for ways to have a career around soccer, almost looking for someone to help them paint a picture of the skill set they really need or could have to be a part of this game if they're not a player. Is there a piece of advice you would give to someone who loves this game, doesn't know how they're yet going to make a career out of it, but they know they want to be around it long term?
Yeah, I guess my only advice really is don't make yourself, don't fit yourself into that box. Basically, don't read all the job boards and try and figure out what skills and requirements there are, and then tailor make yourself that. Because there's so many roles that they're just so hyper like specific, and sometimes what's in the requirements they're not actually, they don't care about, like really, like it's just like a wish list. I always say that like the job requirements are really a wish list, and that sometimes they're going to hire someone who has none of those like experiences or requirements because they like, they met you somewhere else, or whether it's out in the street or on the like, behind the not behind the bleachers, but like, in the stands. What's that like, that like at football stadiums, like around the like, concourse?
I guess. I know what you're talking about, like the divider, if you will, right? It separates the fans from the game.
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
Yeah, they'll meet you there, or like you're just randomly creating content on Twitter, and then the league communications person reaches out to you, which is how I got this. Flat out, like I've just for years now just been doing my own thing, doing what feels natural, what I enjoy personally. I never made myself into what I needed to be to pursue a career in soccer. I just did what I wanted to do, basically.
That's awesome.
And like with the NWSL, like they sense that genuineness, I guess, that naturalness. It resonated with them. So the director of comms would just DM'd me, and she was like, "Your tweets are always so fire. Would you be interested in doing game day socials for us?" And so I was like, yes, like with only
That's awesome.
exclamation points.
Because that was your job interview right there.
How did you really feel when that DM came through? Like, just what was the initial reaction?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to throw my phone out the window because I was like, "You're lying." Oh, no. But I mean, I was so excited because it's so fun, and I love doing, social media. So I will say, outside of football, outside of soccer, I was making myself into like a social media manager. My old boss called me like social media maven, which is like the dumbest thing ever, but I laugh at it still. But like in general, like I was learning how to be a social media manager, which is, there's so many layers to it, but it is this so super exciting. We've been using social media since MySpace or whatever was before, that one thing called right before MySpace. We've been using that like casually since then, but like this is now the main form of receiving news, of interacting with your sports teams, of interacting with your friends and family. Like it is now the biggest communication tool for businesses and brands. And I enjoy the psychology behind social media, the creativity, the like implementation of it. And I just kind of pursued that. And then now I'm doing that for a living. But that's what I was doing. And then someone picked up on it. So that's my advice. 20 minutes later.
That's great. You heard it here first. Yeah, I love it.
Well, you know what's crazy is that, do what you want to do. I think we had an episode not crazy long ago. We interviewed the guys over at Boost Football, and they used to work at soccer.com. And that's how Andrew got that job. Was he kind of a similar path to you and Liz? And what he kind of mentioned on the show was that he got some advice from like another pro soccer player once upon a time that said, no one's path into this game professionally, whether it's a professional player or anything else that's considered professional, is linear. It's a beeline, right? It's up and down, sideways, north, south, east, west. There's no one way to do it. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. But if you want to see something in the world, make it, create it. And that's what he did. He kind of just picked up a camera, paid for it out of pocket, learned how to do, shoots on his own through YouTube. And out of nowhere, Nike hit him up one day, and soccer.com hit him up one day and said, "Hey, we really like your stuff. Do you want this job that we're kind of creating that sits in-house at soccer.com?" And, to this day, right, I like, people like you, like Andrew, you're living the dream. You didn't even see it coming. You created this opportunity for yourself because it's a skill set you feel like you have, and you really wanted to act on it. And now, I think you have a role that other people probably would be envious of and would want to figure out ways in which they can pursue something similar. So I think, at the end of the day, I mean, I feel like it's a big deal, but I think it's massive, and this is why even Andre and I are doing this pod. We want to be opinionated. We want to be authentic. And we felt like others weren't telling stories like this, so we started doing it ourselves. I think that this is the best way you possibly can do it. So I don't know. I'm inspired. Maybe nobody else is, but at a minimum, I'm inspired.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So we're already well into your career. I think we can kind of stick here for a second. So walk me through the day in the life. Social media is we're still kind of in its infancy, right? I still think there's some people out there who hear social media manager and think, oh, they're a meme god, right? That's all they do. They know how to make memes. They're doing it for every platform, and that's all they do every day, which I think we can all pretty confidently say your role extends far beyond that. But walk us through the day in the life of kind of a game day editor for the league.
So I guess like whether you're a game day social media manager, like social editor, or you're just a social media manager of like, you know, clothing company like Gucci, or like very, very small, random, like hyper local, you know, where that's like one of your many hats is doing social media. Like in general, like you just have to understand your audience. So that's something that you probably already done before game day, or before your big day. Just understand your audience, which as a marketer, I absorb a ton of marketing. I absorb it when I look at ads, when I, you know, scroll through Nike's Instagram, when I engage with Portland Thorns' Twitter. Like that's me absorbing it. So then I carry that with me on game day. I am a fan. Like I've been a fan for a long time. I am also probably in the prime demographic for the NWSL. So I understand what resonates with me and I implement it daily. So I mean, if you want me to be super like, this is what we do on game day. We have our list of games that are that day. And there's a team of us, so we're not all going to work every single game, but we may be playing super support on some, or we'll be social editor number one on a game. Kind of, it varies. So, you know, you just, the main thing really as a league social media is not to push forth your own like brand, your own league's brand. It's actually to like amplify the teams. Because at the end of the day, you don't have a league if your clubs aren't successful. So we basically amplify all their stuff. And like one thing that really resonates with our audience is like game day fits. So, you know, we have the live folder of like all of our live content creators that are on the ground. We're grabbing on the game day fit content. It's a lot of playing around. Social media is a lot of just like playing around and seeing what works. So whether that's like, let's throw up like all of the game day fits as a carousel on Instagram, or like, let's put them as stories on Instagram stories, or let's make a TikTok out of them if we have a lot of videos. You just play around with it. And then when the game's there, you're just kind of chilling. And, what are some like really fun things, like the goals, the sassy celebrations, the sellies, like the crazy saves, like someone nutmegs someone, like, you know, Casey Stoney sits on an ice cooler, like we just like, you know, those are like the random little things that like our fan base love. Everyone loves when Casey Stoney sits on an ice cooler. And we just kind of just go from there. And then the game comes and goes, and we make sure we follow along if there are any milestones. Like Sophia Smith just hit like most fastest goals for a young player. Like I think it was like, I don't remember what the stat was. It was last weekend was a blur, but like she hit like a bunch of goals and is like the youngest and fastest to do it basically. So we amplify that. And then, you know, the game is over. We got our post game content. We're putting that up. You know, it's San Diego versus like North Carolina. The game ends at like 11 p.m. local time. Like we're still up like until midnight, making sure like we have everything. We got that post game stuff we have ready for the morning. And then everything is in the folders, so all the clubs have it, because then the clubs are going to take it and make content throughout the week. Because then, you know, you have like 5 days between the next game. Or for instance, now like we're in an international break. We have nothing to do for 2 weeks. We gotta
Content
like
is king.
Yeah, exact content is king. And now we gotta use that one game and like spread it across 2 weeks. But so yeah, and that's just it's a lot of collaboration, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of playing around, and it's like fun that I get paid for it. But
yeah.
yeah.
It's also a grind. It's also a grind. I mean, I sat here, we sat here,
Mhm.
right, to listen to you kind of break it all down. And, you know, it's a ton of work, but it sounds like it's like in the earliest days of anything, right? You kind of have to lay the foundation so that others can come in after you and just scale it up
Mhm.
faster, even further than you ever thought it could be. That sounds awesome. I think anybody who's, you know, there's probably a lot there across the last 10 minutes of us recording now where someone who's listening could take this and run with it, right? Not put themselves in a box, not just scroll through the job recs and see how they can acquire those very niche specific skills, but do what they love, build a skill set and see if it's translatable to the place they want to be in. And then understand there's a ton of hard work that comes after you land that role. Landing the role is not the goal. You have to put in a ton of hard work to grow what you're doing. And then if you do it right, I think, you know, even from your perspective individually, building a personal brand, right? You've got a little bit of a following. Just doing what you do, just creating all the funny memes that you have. I think that it's exciting now to kind of not just look at where NWSL is, but work at you are as a fan, where you started, like Andre mentioned earlier. It's kind of crazy when you look at it all full circle.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
I
mean, it's like you said earlier, it's not a linear journey. And I will always say, like, don't fit yourself into that box. Find peace in this game. Through maybe at the end of the day just being a fan and like a lover of it. Don't try and like find a career in it, because sometimes it doesn't happen for everyone. But you got to find peace in it, you know, and if it happens, it happens, basically.
So talking about your career a little bit further, I'm just curious, and again, you don't have to disclose any secrets out here. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you know, where your career is now, where do you see yourself in like the next, you know, 3-5 years? Is it working for NWSL? Is it working for, you know, I don't know, league in Europe? Is it doing your own content? Like, where do you kind of envision Liz kind of evolving in your career?
Yeah, I think that I find myself like I could. I don't want to work anywhere else but California, I guess, and
Love
maybe
that.
specifically like Northern California. I'm very proud of like my community here, and I have a lot of skills that I want to give to this community. It would be, you know, and I wouldn't say no to like some sort of like 1-2 year gig with like Arsenal's like women's team, because their content team is so fun.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would be open to any like possibilities, you know, or opportunities. But I want to find myself back, you know, the NWSL Bay Area team. You know, social media isn't just something that you do now, like when you have free time now, like you can be director of social strategy. You can help a club create their social media presence like from the ground up. You know, and I would love to give those talents to that Bay Area team, the community that gave a lot to me. Northern California has given a lot to me. And I'd like to give it back by like creating like just the dumbest memes for for the
telling
kids,
stories.
you know.
Love it.
Yeah, exactly. Of the Tomorrow Liz or something like that. But,
that would be fun. Yeah, full circle again.
Yeah.
See, it's working out.
And like so yesterday I talked to Sarah Loudon. She's a assistant coach at Houston Dash, super like the coolest person ever. And she said something that really resonated with me, because you talk to so many people and in sports, and they're competitors, they're ambitious and stuff like that, and they want to be the best. But Sarah was like, I could find myself she's so happy at the Dash. She was like, I could be an assistant coach here forever, my whole life, because I'm so happy with it. And she's like, if that's where it takes me, like, I'm happy there. So I find that like she found her niche, she found a community that she loves, and I love my community here. And if I never go further than like Gameday Social Media or something like that for the, you know, or for just like the Bay Area team, I would still find that I am like really proud of what I did. If I retire just a social media manager and I never like manage anyone or something like that, I would be okay with that. So
nice.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I love that. Yeah, and that's a great, and it's a great way to look at the sport in general, right? Because I think culturally, even what's built up around the men's game today, we're so obsessed, right, with like, I don't know. You mentioned ambition, right? So many of us want to be the best at what we do. We're competitive. We're counting trophies. We're counting success along the way. When we need to stop and realize that, you know, soccer or football, however you see it, is significantly deeper than that. only one team can win a trophy for that league. Only one team can win a trophy for that competition. It's for me, it's about the tribalism, right? It's about like the community that every team brings. You mentioned you could be happy forever just being in the Northern California area, giving back to the community what it gave to you over time. I think that that's how I think about any team that I support, right? Winning trophies would be the cherry on top, but at a minimum, I just want to be happy with what we're building, with what I'm watching on the field, with the supporters that we have, with the community that we're building. Like all of that makes me content, makes me happy. If we also happen to win trophies on top of it, I'm ecstatic. But it's not going to make or break my season, right? I think it's I'm there for the bar side, that banter and the matches and watching them with friends and just being a part of something bigger than myself. So I resonate with what you said strongly, Liz. I think it's a massive piece to kind of take home with you when you think about growing this game. And that's kind of how I want to close this thing out before we wrap up here. I really want your take on, and I throw this into every interview. So I think it's important to talk about, and there's a lot of discussion around it right now with some of the early inaugural season of MLS Apple TV struggles that we see on Twitter and whatnot right now. People are freaking out, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think we need time. But in your opinion, and this is probably for women's soccer as well as men's soccer, like from your standpoint and what you see every day, what do you think? And you're a supporter of a women's team overseas, so you can really compare and contrast the two. But what do you think it'll take for just the sport in general to grow to a point where it's culturally relevant in the way that the NBA is culturally relevant, or the WNBA, or everybody's talking about, right? The March Madness and the collegiate championships and how much weight some of these sports in America carry. I don't think there's any right blueprint for this, but from your perspective, is there any one thing that this country or North America could use to help grow the game of soccer?
Yeah, I think that one big thing that would help is if the U.S. Women's national team loses its dominance in soccer, in world soccer, because like women's soccer fans in the U.S. are so like transfixed with the U.S. Women's national team that sometimes they don't have enough room for their local clubs. And I think that if we want to like grow and maybe even like match not only like the fervor of like other places in the world have in love with soccer there, but also like help develop our own players to be competitive. We need to stop treating the U.S. Women's national team as a club, and focus more on our grassroots. Help develop and support a Division II women's soccer league. So USL Super League next year will be really great with that. Help develop talent from like start to finish, build up the academies, make them affordable. There's so many things I probably just mentioned here, but in general, the biggest thing that would help grow the sport, and it's super controversial, is if the U.S. Women's national team was no longer dominant, and that every World Cup and Olympics and major tournament they go into, they're like not the like expected winner.
Which is, I mean, that's a great and interesting statement to make as close as we are to the Women's World Cup, right? And I think that, there's great timing on the interview and the statement. But I actually see your point. I think we've treated the women's national team as this pinnacle, as a club, as you said, because I think it's almost like it's been the trajectory of that team for so long. We discussed before, the women's game and the club aspect of it all didn't really get a chance to form in a scaled fashion until very recently. So up until that point, the women's national team was seen as everything. They always had more games than the men's national team throughout the year. And so it was always kind of seen as, that elite club that you could only gain access to by following this path, right? And then you kind of just forget about everything else that exists outside of it, the ecosystem that we're all trying to build. It's actually a great point to make. I've never really thought about it like that. That's interesting. So, all right. Well, I think we've done a great job of painting a picture of who is Liz. Before I let you go for the interview, is there anything that you want to really kind of give a shout out to before we wrap up?
I guess like find your local grassroots women's soccer team. WPSL, UWS, USLW, like find it, support it, volunteer. That's how I got, I also got started that way. Volunteer your talents, and like whether it's social media, photography, videography, I don't know, like help with game day operations and staff and
Yeah.
volunteer, whatever. Get involved, and then hashtag go to games, which is something that all my friends like to talk about on Twitter. Hashtag go to games, just like go to a
That's
game.
awesome.
It doesn't have to be, you know, women's soccer. Could also be MLS, USL,
Yeah,
you know, USL.
that's sweet.
Just like, yeah, just kind of fall in love with soccer like the way that you want to fall in love with it. And that's all I
That's
got to say.
amazing. That reminds me of something. So there's a team here in Seattle called Ballard FC, and Ballard is just kind of a really quaint neighborhood. It's not really anything big or anything, but they started a USL2 team last year, and I have a shirt that they gifted me, and it says Rome, Paris, London, and then Ballard. Right. So when you think about it, it's like posh champagne football. Like you don't have to go to the Emirates to, you know, watch a game. Just go to Interbay and watch, you know, the guys play for, you know, 90 minutes. So that's that's really good advice. It's like, yes, as much as you want to, you know, take in content from, you know, the highest level, like the best way to support the game or even to learn the game is to get involved with your community. So that's amazing advice. Love it.
Agree wholeheartedly. Liz, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate you. For anyone who's tuning in and stuck around to the end of the show, we appreciate you as well. We're going to link everything Lis Schendel down in the description below. Follow her on social. She's hilarious and is doing a great job of putting the NWSL on this massive pedestal. So again, Liz, thank you so much for joining. For those who haven't done it already, like the video down below, subscribe to the channel. From everyone here at Box to Box, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.